Yeah, and, Sarah was always like, "Hey, like, bring Henry in, bring Christopher in," and I'm like, "Really? Like, you think that'll work?" And she's like, "Yeah," and I did, and it's so cool to see the student athletes respond to babies and young children. I mean, you see a different side of them. It was when I first brought them into baseball, I was like, "Oh gosh, like, hey, like, I don't know how this is gonna go. These are baseball guys," and it was like all of a sudden it was like a switch that just flipped and they were just like, oh, hey, Henry, like, do you want to, and just like high fives and fist bumps. And I'm just like, this is so cool to see you all interact with my child. And yeah, to bring them to the field and have them run around on the baseball diamond or taking them to the soccer field and having them, kick the ball at halftime or at the end of the game. It is really cool.
What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have assistant strength and conditioning coach for Northern Kentucky University, Maggie Smith. Maggie, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited. First time for me, so this is awesome.
I'm super excited as well, too. It's always my favorite when I get to interview somebody and it's their first time on a podcast, because I like to think of myself as the softball of podcast interviewers. Like Samson has the Move the Needle podcast, which is hosted by two really great coaches, Hunter and Mike. But they dive as in-depth as possible into things. And I like to think that we have a little bit easier conversations. So
Good.
That's my hope for this one.
Perfect. I'll keep the nerves down then. Yeah, I'm excited.
Perfect. Yeah, just a typical conversation. That's all we're having.
That's what I love.
Yep. Well, okay. Can you just give us a background of your career? What's led you to Northern Kentucky? I know you've been there for a long time. And then what's your kind of transformation has been during your time in Northern Kentucky?
Yeah, so in high school, I was a two-sport athlete. I played soccer and ran track and had a love of weightlifting. So after freshman year, you're allowed to take a strength class. So sophomore year, I signed up for that and had great athletic success on the field and on the track. So I thought, well, junior year, let's hit it even harder. So I started doing two-a-days. I would go in early and work out with the football team at 6 a.m. before school, and then I would work out during school for my class, and then usually go to practice after that. And unfortunately, I put on a little too much mass, and it just wasn't ideal for my performance, and ended the career not on a high note. And so I knew going into college, I wanted to hopefully prevent this from happening, to young athletes. So I went into Northern Kentucky University, where I also played soccer and ran track. We were Division II at the time, and exercise science was my major. And the end of it, I had to do an internship, as we all do. And my professor and I found an internship with PitFit, which is training race car drivers. So my dad and I used to always go to Mid-Ohio and Indianapolis. We loved IndyCar, we loved Formula One. So I had a passion there. And I was like, wow, how cool would this be if I could train race car drivers? So moved up to Indianapolis for about a month, worked with race car drivers, IndyCar, worked with their pit crews, worked with some kart guys, actually worked with some Indianapolis Colts too, and then some general population for their fitness classes, and had a really good time. It was awesome, meeting the athletes, getting to know, a professional athlete and how they work out. And there were a couple whose personalities just didn't have a lasting effect on me. And I was like, well, maybe I don't want to work with professional athletes. So, maybe I'll go into just, in a sense, collegiate strength training. And so I had to do observation hours as well. And my sister worked she was a fitness center manager at a recreation center. And she goes, come do observation hours with us. And I'm like, no, I'm not working with general pop. Like, don't want it. I want to work with athletes. She's like, come on. I was like, all right. So I went, and honestly, after day one, fell in love. The energy, the culture of the clients and the trainers was fantastic. And I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. And so I got a job there working the front desk. And in the meantime, I studied for my personal training certification and became a personal trainer and was there for 13 years. And COVID happened at the end of that, and the culture shifted. All the trainers pretty much left. And so I knew I needed to shift a little bit. I wasn't happy in that environment anymore. I knew I wanted to still be helping people get strong and keeping them healthy and active. It just wasn't in that environment. So luckily I found Northern Kentucky did an online master's program. So I signed up for that. I had a 1-year-old at the time, so I knew I was like, okay, I can make this work of personal training and going back to school and kind of just see where this allows me to pivot to afterwards. And I met with the director because I'd never done online before, brand new to me. So met with him, had a great conversation, and I don't know if it was later that day or the next day, he sent me an email and he was like, hey, are you interested in being the GA? And I was like, well, like, what does that entail? He's like, well, you get, perks, school is paid for and you get paid a little bit and you get to have the experience of, working with your assigned teams. And I was like, okay, like I'll have an interview with the director. So he hooked me up with a director of sports performance, Sarah, and I had an interview with her later in the week, and it went really well. She offered me the spot, and I was like, well, just give me 24 hours to think this over, because me being a mom was number one. So I knew I had to choose between the GA and personal training. So I just had some hard conversations and was like, hey, I need to pivot. Let's try this. So I had the week, said goodbye to my personal training clients and signed on to be the GA and worked with baseball, women's soccer, men's and women's tennis. And 2 years later, thankfully, a position was opened for a part-time strength coach here and applied for it and got it. So I'm starting my second official year as the assistant strength coach, but I've been here for 4 years. So, and I added on men's and women's cross country into my team. So yeah, kind of a different career path, I think, than your normal average strength coaches.
That's what we love. You're like a podcast host's dream, because there's a lot of questions that I can follow up with. So
Perfect.
I mean, the first one, and I think obviously, I think it sticks out to a lot of people. Like, I just had this conversation yesterday with a young intern who's a senior, and he's trying to go into a GA opportunity next year. And he just said, what is some advice that you have for me? And I said, ultimately, like, your GA opportunity is when you have to be the most selfish of ever, like, in your life. And that's where you have to spend all your time at the facility, do all these things, right? And basically this is where this is the 2 years that people talk about grinding as much as possible. And I was like, then after that, you can let up, and it doesn't have to be this whole hardo strength coach kind of, I'm here at 4 and I leave at 8 p.m. or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, like, that's the advice that I give him. That's the advice I give to pretty much anybody going into their GA opportunity. But for you, it's obviously a different scenario, being a mom.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Like, what did you weigh in your decisions when first deciding to accept the position? And then how did it go for the 2 years? Was it 2 years that your GA was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah. So how did it go for those 2 years as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a lot of conversation it was kind of the end of COVID. So my son wasn't in daycare. He was being, kind of tossed around between like my mom and then my husband and I. And so it was always just making sure one of us were home while the others were working. Thankfully, my mom's retired, so she's super helpful, as well as my dad. And so it was just making sure mom was always number one. And thankfully, the director, Sarah, who's still here, she didn't have a child at the time. She does now, but she really understood it, even though she didn't have a child, which was really nice. So, usually you're supposed to work a certain amount of hours. And I tried to get there, but it was like, hey, I want to be home with Henry, and I need to be home. And, she was she allowed me that, which was really nice. She, during our interview, she knew that I was, grinding at the beginning. I mean, our rec center was open from 6 to 9, and I was in there almost every single minute, just working. And then, now is my time to kind of be a mom. But then again, I transitioned to careers. So I wanted to put that work in. But then again, it's like, okay, falling back to I'm mom first, and then I'm this second. And so having just a lot of conversations with my husband and my parents of like, hey, can we handle this? What does this look like? And thankfully, Sarah was just super flexible. And I just appreciate her so much that she just allowed me to not always have to be in here all the time, because it is a traditional thing, when you want to be a GA and you're young, like, you got to be grinding, you got to be doing everything. And, I didn't in a sense show up like that, but I was still respected, and she still appreciated me, and it ended up working out, thankfully really well. So yeah, I'm really appreciative of her and her patience.
Yeah, but you were grinding in a different way. Obviously being a mom, there's a lot, because when I was a GA, if I wasn't at the facility, I was probably playing Xbox or something, instead of taking care of another human being and having somebody I'm married to as well. So ultimately a very different experience, but I think that's just so cool. And what's interesting to me as well is that I feel like it's probably one of the most challenging ways you can approach your GA. And then on top of that, deciding, okay, this is still the career for me, like going through such a challenging experience, but then deciding, okay, this is what I really want to do. Like, would you make that same decision again now being on the strength and conditioning side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, my husband and I were like, well, we want to have another child. And so the GA kind of had that timeline of like, well, we can have the next one kind of then, not sooner, but a little bit later. And so it was funny, my second year, I was pregnant pretty much the whole time that I was finishing up my GA. And I walked in graduation, and 4 weeks later to the day, I had my second son. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. And really, the athletes, it was really cool. Hopefully, to see me, be pregnant and be able to coach them and move around. And it was it was pretty cool. Kind of once in a lifetime sometimes.
Yeah, no, I do think that stuff is so cool. And I don't have kids yet. Hopefully it's in the future for myself and my wife. But one of the things I love about college athletics is watching younger families. I mean, we have two coaches on our staff here. One has 3 kids. We have actually all of them have kids now that I think about it. But one brings his 6-year-old son to practice almost every single day. Another has his son come by, and you get to watch him grow up, and you get to see the relationships that they develop with the athletes too. It's just such a cool experience to see that, and they get to grow up with a lot of great role models around. I'm sure. Is that what you've seen too?
Yeah. And, Sarah was always like, hey, like, bring Henry in, bring Christopher in. And I'm like, really? Like, you think that'll work? And she's like, yeah. And I did. And it's so cool to see the student athletes respond to babies and young children. I mean, you see a different side of them. It was when I first brought them into baseball, I was like, oh gosh, like, hey, like, I don't know how this is going to go. These are baseball guys. And it was like all of a sudden it was like a switch that just flipped, and they were just like, oh, hey, Henry, like, do you want to, and just like high fives and fist bumps. And I'm just like, this is so cool to see you all interact with my child. And yeah, to bring them to the field and have them run around on the baseball diamond, or taking them to the soccer field and having them, kick the ball at halftime or at the end of the game. It is really cool. And, my boss now has a little girl, and it's so cool to see her just running around on the court in basketball, and just her little outfits, and it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, I'll never forget when one of my best friends brought in his child for the first time. He had a kid when he was the soccer strength coach for Tennessee. And just a funny story with this too. Our director at the time, Dan Worth, he's very big into like genetics and seeing how people are built. And he told me he liked me the first time because I had a big head, and he was like, I always love looking at head size. And I'm like, all right, dude.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, he brings his daughter in, and he meets her, and he's like, she is so cute. He goes, great head, slightly bow-legged. She'll be a great sprinter.
There you go.
And I was just like, all right, man. Like,
Look for that little toe
relax.
in for those sprinters. You're like, you're going to be a quick one.
Exactly. And she is. She's super fast now. I think she's 7 now, so she's super fast, which is just awesome. I think that's one of the sides of athletics that you don't typically get to see, unless you're involved in it every single day. Because, that's a concern of mine too, is how much can you actually be home for your family, but knowing that you can actually bring your kids in and bring your family in and have them be excited about being there. It's very cool.
Yeah. And we're fortunate enough, we have 3 strength coaches on staff, and then we have a GA. So our load, in a sense, is pretty light, I feel like, to other places. So there's a lot of freedom to be home when needed and if needed. So yeah, that's an awesome perk to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you also say you spent 13 years as a personal trainer and then transitioning into the collegiate side. Like, how was that experience changing from, it's a different field, essentially, it's a subsection of the field, but you treat things a lot differently. My interns who have been personal trainers before always have a lot of questions about why we operate the way we do within strength and conditioning. So how was that experience for you, especially with 13 full years? That's a really long time to be in one subsection and then switch to the other.
Yeah. And thankfully, I worked with kind of every age group. So I did get to work with athletes that were high school and college. And then I worked up to, my oldest client, I think, was almost 80. So I had, a little bit of some young life, in my everyday, which was nice. But yeah, transitioning, thankfully, Sarah was pretty hands off with me, which I think is somewhat kind of rare, but she knew I had that experience. So she allowed me to have a little trial and error and let's see how this goes. And she provided feedback when needed. I would come to her and with questions, but honestly, I'm not the yell in your face, cuss at you. So it was pretty seamless to transition from one to the next. I just had to be sometimes a bit more vocal and be a bit more of a leader and a little less conversation, like you would in a personal training session. So, but yeah, thankfully my athletes were super patient with me and accepting and just knowing where I came from. And that just made it so easy to really transition into that role. And, you know, after 2-3 years kind of developing into the strength coach that I want to be. And yeah, it's thankfully the freedom has helped me grow into a direction that, you know, I want to be and not forcing me into some place and someone that I don't want to be. So yeah, it's different, but I think it all works together.
That's awesome. And, you know, seriously, it really is a good testament to having good mentors and people who will allow you to kind of work your way through things, especially with your experience. Like you have more experience as a PT alone than I do as just a regular strength and conditioning coach. So if you were to come work with our department, you know, I'd be asking you a lot more questions probably than you'd be asking me. So it certainly makes a difference. You know, what were kind of some of the things that surprised you about strength and conditioning?
Good question. I feel like I wasn't surprised by much. I think just because all the years under my belt. Maybe having relationships with student athletes, you know, my big thing, I'm trying to talk to them as much as I can. And I think the surprise came when I would talk to them, how mature they were in having a conversation back with me. And I really appreciated that. So I think, you know, I was surprised maybe more with my athletes and how they responded to me because a lot of them didn't know how old I was, you know, that I was a mom, that I came from a different career. And so I kind of hid that just a little bit, didn't want to overshare just because I didn't know how they would take that. You know, I was almost worried, like, are they not going to think I'm qualified to do this job and whatnot? So I think the surprise came the more I shared, the more they connected with me and the more responsive they were and respectful to me and they, you know, they'll come up to me, hey, how's Henry? How's Christopher? And I'm like, they're great. Thanks for asking. What are they doing? You know, and they're curious. They want to know. And I think that was the biggest surprise is, you know, them doing that. And it was just, it felt really good to me. And it means a lot to a coach to see the younger generation, how responsive they are and appreciative. And they actually do want to know about you. And yeah, so that was probably honestly the biggest surprise that I've had. And, you know, I'm still pretty new to the strength and conditioning world, so I'm sure I'll have a lot more surprises come my way, but that's been the initial one so far.
Yeah, I like what you bring up there, and I appreciate that you say, you know, the younger generation as a whole, because I feel like when I talk with other coaches, there's a lot of almost negative talk about the younger generations because of the social media, lack of attention span. And there's been research that comes out that shows that these things are legitimate problems compared to previous generations. But ultimately, like it feels like how I would imagine, you know, somebody who grew up listening to jazz would think about like EDM music, right? And like they're just like, this is crazy. I can't believe that this is the world now, right? But then I think about, okay, well, I love EDM. You know, I love listening to EDM. What's going to bother me in 20 years? You know, and I'm going to say this is crazy and this is dumb, right? So I appreciate you saying that because I found the exact same experience is that people really care and people are really invested. Like when I came back from my wedding, that was like the number one thing I talked about for a week. And it wasn't just like, oh, how was the wedding? It was like, okay, how was this? What about this part? You know,
Those little details.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just makes you feel really good.
Yeah, 100%. And it feels like you can be closer to them. It feels like you can develop even better relationships with them.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's just super important. And obviously, I love building relationships. And so when I can, you know, chat with something about something we have in common, you know, it just builds that trust and that buy-in just so much more. It makes it happen so much more naturally and organically. So, yeah, lucky.
Yeah. What are those things that you really focus on when building relationships? What are kind of the key points that you really kind of try to hammer home when starting with a new team or starting with a new athlete?
Yeah, so usually I'm able to get the roster a little bit in advance of when I'm going to see the athletes, which is nice because my goal in the first 2 weeks is to know everyone's name. Usually now it's within the first week, but when I was brand new and I gave myself 2 weeks, but now it's like, okay, how soon can I get to them? So I'm Googling them. I'm checking their Instagram if it's not private. And I'm like, okay, where are they from? Do they have a dog? Do they have siblings? What other sports did they play? So that way when I meet them, I'm like, oh, and I'm like, so where are you from? And I can try to have a connection like, oh, I vacationed there, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I think just building that relationship is just super invaluable. And I hope my student athletes find it, genuine too, because I appreciate when my athletes come early to lift, because then I can be like, hey, how you doing? How's the day? It's like, fine. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, did you eat before this? And they're like, okay, like she wants to talk to me. And so I'm trying to really have as much conversation with my athletes, a genuine conversation that I can. So that way, the buy-in and the trust is there. So it's nice because now my athletes, for the most part, know me and they're like, oh, hey, Maggie, yeah, so I had this to eat and I feel like, and they'll tell me more things, and the conversation is just that much more meaningful and makes you feel good. So, yeah.
Yeah, they can definitely sniff it out when it's not genuine.
Absolutely. Yeah, they'll call you out. And, I let my teammate or my teams kind of, in a sense, do their own thing in the weight room. They've got a lot of free reign. They can choose the music. I don't mind. I just want it quiet when we start. But yeah, so I give them a lot of freedom, but also, hoping for a lot of respect as well too. And they give that to me. So they earn the freedom to kind of, go off and try a few different things that, maybe a regular strength and conditioning coach wouldn't allow them to do. But yeah, I appreciate my athletes, and until they show me that I shouldn't allow them all that freedom, I'm gonna let them go. So yeah.
But the freedom is way more fun, seriously, because that's where you, like you said, you get to see kind of more genuine, I would say examples of who the athletes are. It's tough because I remember I'm a very similar type coach to you. I don't really yell a lot. I remember when I was younger, I used to try to like hype people up a ton, but now it's kind of more just like, all right, let's just have a great lift. But our lift yesterday, even I was like, you know what? This is as loose as it could possibly be, but then I'm checking reps, I'm checking sets. Everybody's doing everything that they need to do, and they're getting really high quality work done. They just happen to be laughing and dancing a lot in between. And I was like, what's the problem with this? Like, why am I so anti this? It doesn't have to be this militant style. There can be a lot more freedom. And I think the athletes like it a lot more that way. They like coming in when it's like that.
Absolutely. And like women's soccer, I learned so many different dance moves from them. They're hilarious. And their song choices. And, then sometimes baseball turns on things and I'm like, do we like this music? Like, really? Do we? And they're like, Maggie, it's bad. And I'm like, it is bad. But hey, if it gets you guys motivated and wanting to work, who am I to say turn it off? So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it's fun. You get to see the genuine side of them, and
Yeah,
they actually want to be there,
exactly.
which makes a big difference. Seriously.
It does.
You mentioned something really interesting at the beginning, which was that you just found a love for weightlifting early on in your high school career.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, what I've noticed with females is that typically they'll start stuff a little bit later in college when they get exposed to it. They don't, in my opinion, society doesn't kind of push females towards the weight room earlier on. I remember like in our extra lifting hours at my high school, it was all guys all the time. And it was a very, it was exciting for me. And I remember there were other female athletes that I was friends with who were like, yeah, I'd love to like weightlift and everything, but it kind of just seems like a bro fest a little bit. Right. Which is correct, and that's what
Yeah.
it was.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
but you mentioned lifting with the football team. You mentioned an early love for strength and conditioning. Like, how did that first come about? And what was ultimately like the driving force for you to continue with it and continue to grow your love for weightlifting?
Yeah. So my mom was a physical education teacher growing up, and she was actually mine and my sister's PE teacher in elementary school. And so she would get up every morning at like 4 or 4:30 and work out. And so seeing that, I was like, okay, I want to be like that when I grow up. And so I had just a really good friend in high school whose dad was the strength coach. And so he would kind of pull me along and be like, come on, let's go, let's do it. And I'm like, all right, totally. So there were one or two girls every now and then. I'd be like, hey, come meet me at weights. And they're like, we'll see, we'll see. But mostly it was just me. And so I think having him pull me in and then also knowing the strength coach was really helpful, And I just became so addicted. Guys love seeing a girl lifting heavy weight. And so therefore I would put as much weight on that bar that I could muster out. And just hearing them cheer for me and, keep going, Maggie, it was like, okay, let's do more. And so it just really motivated me and just, made me want to keep doing it because I was having such great success in the weight room. And then when I came to NKU, we were Division II. I think Truist Arena, which is our weight area, was built maybe my sophomore year. And so we weren't working out, but I was going in there asking questions like, hey, can we do a workout? And so I was going in there as much as I could. And then when it wasn't open, I was going over to the rec center and doing my own thing. So I just, after what high school kind of did to me, I was like, well, I can still do this. It just needs to be done in a different manner. You don't know what you don't know. So I just kept trying to educate myself, and it stuck with me my whole life. I mean, of course, I love seeing athletic performance results, but now being a mom, how can I keep up with my 1 and 4-year-old and not feel like I need to lay down at the end of the day completely exhausted? I still want to have some energy. And so, yeah, it's to me, it's just been super addicting. And it was a very positive experience in a sense from day one, even though the career didn't end and that put a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. It was just inspiration for me to just keep going and get better. And so that's what it led to. And I think that's what I try to instill in my athletes too, is I want the weight room to be a very positive experience and a warm, welcome. So that way, we're teaching these kids not just, the X's and O's and how to lift, but also like what's life after this. And I want them to see a weight room and remember, I had a really positive experience in that weight room. That's a safe space for me. And I'm going to go to it as much as I can. And it may not always be perfect, but it's a place for me to go that I know I'm safe and I enjoy, I have great memories of. And, that's just what I'm hoping carries my athletes through, to their next big chapter in life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's just so important because, I mean, if I were to ask my team right now, who wants to go to the NBA? Everybody's raising their hands, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, my 3 years I've been here, we've got one guy who's been able to have a two-way contract, right? And so ultimately, it's just not in the cards for everybody. But everybody is going to continue to have to be physically fit for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And one thing I tell them too is you guys are naturally going to be leaders, having been college athletes. You've been around leadership a lot more. Whatever career field you go into, people will typically see you as kind of leaders, and you'll be more confident and you'll be more comfortable working in team settings. So ultimately, like, that happens, and then you become leaders of your family and you set the example for them. So you have to have these basic tools to be able to keep enjoying lifting. And it's discouraging to me. It sucks when you see people who just like, when they say like, once I'm done with volleyball, once I'm done with basketball, I'm never going to lift again because I'm sick of lifting, or whatever it may be. It's like, well, what can we do? Like, seriously, like what are the things that we can do to make it more positive for you? Because like, it's sad when you see people on planes who can't lift their own bags up overhead, right? When it's just these basic small activities that just really affect your life. Once you get older, if you're not able to continue to stay physically fit, those things are going to be a struggle for you. So I love that you focus on that because it's a huge part of life. It's something they really need to be concerned with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, we don't have many kids that go to that next level. Fortunately, I've had a handful of baseball guys that have, which has been nice. And, I'm always asking them questions like, well, hey, what's your strength coach do? What's going on? And, but yeah, when I hear very few, but when I hear that I'm done when I'm done, it's like, well, hopefully you take a little break, but then you come back and you realize, I did have a lot of fun here. It doesn't have to be as intense, or I don't have to always do all the sets and reps, but yeah, hopefully they find that they want to get back to it, that they miss it a little bit.
Yeah, I really hope for these. And I remember there was one player we had with basketball who was awesome. I loved working with him, but his diet was terrible. And I was like, dude, the moment you stop working out, like, you're going to gain 10 pounds. Like, I'm just telling you this. Like, so don't stop working out. And I was like, and you need to fix your diet. And we just had that type of relationship where we could be very open and honest with each other. And so he stopped working out, and then he became a GA, and he's, stressed all the time and everything, and didn't cut out the Burger King. And he texted me, he's like, all right, I gained 10 pounds. What do I do? And I was like, yeah, I told you it was going to happen. So, but then luckily after his hiatus, he made it back to exactly where he needs to be. So I'm happy with that. Yeah.
It's nice when they come back home.
Thank goodness. Yeah, seriously. And especially the ones who you don't expect to. Those are like the best texts to receive when it's people you don't really expect. Yeah. And they send you a text and you're like, yes, like, please.
I got them.
Another really cool experience that you mentioned too is working with Pit Fit.
Hmm.
I think that's so cool. And like you said, your family, even pre-show, you were talking about how you guys love IndyCar racing. You go to the Indy 500 every year. How is that experience to be able to go home and tell your parents that you're working with IndyCar drivers and professional drivers? Because I
Yeah.
remember when I worked with the Jets, like I watched the Jets growing up with my dad. My dad was always like, you got to meet Antonio Cromartie, you got to meet Nick Mangold, like all this stuff. It's a really cool experience. So how was that for you?
Um, yeah, it was probably left me speechless. I mean, when I first saw Scott Dixon like walk down the hallway, I'm like, oh my gosh, there he is. And I just like kept walking and I was like, wow, okay, I get to meet him today. Like this is pretty darn cool. And then J.R. Hildebrand I got to meet, and Pippa Mann, and then up and coming James Hinchcliffe. And when James came on, Jim, my boss, had to leave. He goes, "Hey, I'm not just not going to be here the whole time. Like, do you think you can handle this?" And he's like, "You'll have other people." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got this totally." So I like call my dad. I'm like, "Dad, who's James Hinchcliffe?" And he goes, "You need to Google him right now. You need to figure out everything you can about him." And so I did. And I mean, we had some of the best relationships, just him and I talking about, whatever. But I'm sure my dad and mom are better at telling you how I responded, because I was probably just giddy and it was just so cool. And then, after a while it starts to soften, but still it's like when they walk through the door, you're like, oh my gosh, like I've watched you on TV for so long. And then I went to Mid Ohio and IndyCar and saw you race. And now like I'm telling you what to do and, marking down your reps and your sets. And it's such a cool experience. And I'm really glad I got to have that experience, because it showed me it's within reach, how quickly I was just, at Northern Kentucky University. And then after a little bit of investigating and talking to my professor, he's like, "Hey, I found this place." And I'm like, "Yes, please." And it was amazing. So how quickly, your life can shift, and being able to pivot, I think, is really important. Of course, when you're young, you don't have a whole lot of responsibilities in a sense of, being a mom and, work and whatnot. So I think when you're young, it's just super important to be able to pivot in those situations and say yes if it feels right. And it sure as heck felt right for me. And I think that's just, it's really important. And getting out of your comfort zone, the comfort zone and then where the magic happens is all out here. And making sure you're in where the magic happens more than you are in your comfort zone, I think is just super important and has a really, a huge impact on your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I had almost the exact same experience, just like I said with the Jets with football. Like I remember that was at my second ever internship, and I was like, "Wow, this is so cool! Like where this field can take me." You'll appreciate this story too, especially as an Ohio State fan. I met Terrell Pryor. He was with the Jets at the time, and this was like when I was truly stepping out of my comfort zone. I get a little like socially anxious. I get a little awkward sometimes. And it's funny that I now host a podcast, right? But ultimately, we were meeting for the first time, and he's got massive hands. He's like 6'8", tough, super tall football player, and he's holding like 3 Gatorades in one hand and then like a couple bars in another. And so he's like, "Hey, I'm TP. Nice to meet you." And like he holds out his hand, and I thought he was like trying to hand me the Gatorade, so I went like double hands underneath like to go grab him, and he was like, "No, man."
No.
And then like brought my hands back, and then I don't know what possessed me to do this. He's like, "I'm TP," like repeated it and like tried to give me a second chance, and I just went hands straight back underneath again. He was like, "No, man, fist bump." And I was like, "Oh, for sure, for sure."
Yeah,
Fist bumped him. Yeah. I was like,
My
"Cool,
bad.
man, cool." So,
Yeah.
but it was cool because like you said, you get to meet these people who, you've had endless exposure to them on TV, but you never actually get to meet them. Then you find out they're just normal people,
Yeah,
who have their own
absolutely.
lives and everything as well too.
Yeah. So yeah, it was, just talking average, talk. Hey, what are you doing later today? Where are you
Yeah.
going to dinner? How's the girlfriend? How's the, just average conversation. You're like, okay, all right, well, yep, okay, perfect.
Yeah, you're just a dude. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
So you mentioned, your GA allowed you to kind of grow into the coach that you really wanted to be. And then I know you've already mentioned kind of one of your principles is having a positive weight room. What are some of your other core principles as a coach? What are the things that you really focus on with your teams?
I think just being consistent for them, showing up obviously consistently, making sure, I'm at lift or at practice as early as I can be to have conversations. And then, kind of leaving mom, wife, friend at the door and coming in as Coach Maggie for them every single time and being consistent in my attitude, I think is very helpful to them because they always know who they're going to get then. So just making sure that I'm showing up for them every single day consistently, I think they appreciate. So then that just allows, for the lift the day to kind of go as is. They're not going in, is Maggie in a bad mood today? Like what, so I think just making sure I'm consistent. And then, like I said, I like being, if I don't have a team, showing up to things early, if I'm meeting them on the field, or obviously if they're coming in the weight room, going and talking to them like, hey, how you doing? And if I have a minute, going and sitting by them and like, hey, how's the day? What's going on? Talk to me. Building those relationships, like I said, for, the buy-in and the trust. So, really those are my go-tos. I don't have to, thankfully, I don't have to get upset really with my athletes, which is nice. There have been a few times where I've, had some resistance, and my thing is I kind of just get it with kindness. Like, how kind can I be to them? Like, maybe something's going on. Hey, do you want to talk about it? What's going on? And then usually it just naturally dissolves and, we can move on. But there's been, a few times where I've have to get on them a little bit. And baseball, one time was being a little rowdy, and I didn't mind it. They were all doing what they needed to do. We were all safe. We were all having fun. Well, then I could tell it was kind of getting on the nerves of some of the other players. I was like, all right, I got to nip this in the bud, because it's not good when not everyone's on the same page. And so there were a few players around me, and I was like, hey, we're going to have a little conversation about this lift afterwards. So finish up, because we were almost done, finish up. And all of a sudden they're like, turn the music off, get your lift done, clean it up. Maggie's going to talk to us. And it was like, oh, did I sound that intense? But I went in and talked to Sarah. I was like, hey, I'm going to have a little conversation, just they're being a little too rowdy, and I can just tell. And she's like, oh, you are? Okay. And so even she came out, and I was like, hey, if y'all want to act like average Joes and, do this and be all rowdy, then we'll just go to Campus Rec with everyone else, and it's pretty much all you have to say to a baseball player is acting like average Joes, and they kind of shape up. So, but it was just interesting to me I didn't yell at them. I'm sure my tone shifted a little bit, but don't take my niceness for weakness. And I think when they hear that tone change, it's like, oh, okay, okay, guys, listen up, and so, it's nice that I don't have to get angry at them to get that attention and to get what I need. And honestly, that's happened once or twice. And I'm entering year 4, and I'm grateful that my athletes are nice and responsive and responsible and show up on time and all that stuff. So I don't really have to get on them. So I did work with women's soccer this morning though, and I got on them a little bit, but so they'll listen to this podcast and go, wait a second. But yeah, it's, you just find what team responds to what the best. Some years it's, I can stay calm and I'm good. And other teams, athletes come in, and I got to kind of just tune everything just a little bit differently. And I can see this, in this women's soccer team, for instance, they're getting ready to start their season. They just needed a little rein it in. And so I was like, hey, can we have a little real talk here? And I said a few words, and then afterwards I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, that's not like me. Let's have a great practice. But like, I just want to make sure that we're setting the tone and we're getting 1% better each day, because at the end, we all have the same goal. So I just want to make sure, that we're ready to go and do what we need to do. So yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that's awesome. And I think those two things go hand in hand when you talk about being consistent every single day, and then also not having to be a scream and yell in your face type of coach. Like, ultimately, if you are the same every single day, they know any deviation from that means that something is probably seriously wrong, right? Or some grave mistake has been made too.
Right.
My players know when I stand in one spot in the weight room, that's a problem. Like, because every single time, every other lift, I'm moving through as much as possible through the weight room, trying to go talk to everybody. When I stand in one spot and I'm just kind of got my arms crossed, I'm looking at something, they're like, all right, something's going down.
What's
so we
up?
got to make sure we, figure it out. So,
Yeah.
but ultimately that consistency piece really is what plays into it, and allows you to kind of, like you said, you don't have to be the scream in your face coach. You can just say just a couple words and they'll know that it's different from how Maggie typically is. So now we know for a fact that we've got to correct what we're doing.
Yeah.
Is it the same way with your kids too?
Yeah, definitely. One is 1 year old, so he's still figuring out. But the other is 4, and yeah, he knows, when mama's upset a little bit. So, but yeah, he's very kind, because when he gets upset, Henry, do you want a hug? Do you need a hug? And so he'll come over, Mama, you need a hug? And I'm like, yes, I do. Please give me a hug to calm me down so I don't yell anymore or whatever I'm doing. So,
That's awesome. Well, there you go. He's very emotionally in tune, which is
yes,
fantastic.
he is.
So my final question for you, and I'm just curious about this because you've had an extended career within the physical training field. You said it's only your 4th year going into strength and conditioning, but add that into your experience with the personal trainer. That's 17 years that we're working with, and then let alone your own training age as well too. What advice would you give to young strength coaches at the start of their careers?
Yeah. For me personally, I think asking more questions. I wish I would have asked a dozen more questions than I did. But, I'm just I view kind of things from the back, and I like to just see what's going on. And so for me, it would definitely be ask more questions. And then, I think for everyone else, my goal, and I told Sarah this going in, was, why I wanted to shift careers a bit, was to never be the smartest person in the room. Otherwise, you're in the wrong room. And for me to make sure that I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone just keeps making me better and better. And so I think saying yes to a lot within reason as a young strength coach is really important. Networking, as much as possible. I mean, how easy is it now with social media? I've reached out to a couple of coaches that I really admire, and I'm just like, hey, I'm a new strength coach and I've got some questions, and they are super responsive. And they're big time names. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this person is messaging me back. Like he is taking time out of his day to give me feedback on a question that I have. So yeah, I think just putting yourself out there, like I said, comfort zone, where the magic happens. Make sure you're out there where the magic happens. And I think that will just push you into, such a better person. And, say yes as much as you can, work as hard as you can, all the obvious things. But then again, stay true to yourself as well. Yeah, things happen for a reason, I think, most of the time. And so, there's a reason why I didn't have a great, end of my high school career, which then, led me into all the things and my next chapters in life. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so happy where I'm at. And I just feel lucky, which I think is a lot of hard work and opportunity put together. And so, yeah, I appreciate all this. And now I'm on a podcast, which is pretty crazy.
Well, I was about to
Thanks,
say, I
Connor.
reached out to you over Instagram to be able to set this meeting up, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, I always encourage people to reach out. The worst thing that can happen is you get no, or
Yeah.
just not an answer, and then ultimately,
Yeah.
like, what does that really change? Nothing. One thing you said was asking more questions. What were the questions that you wish you asked more?
I think it's like specifically at Pit Fit of honestly just like, why do you train your drivers this way? What goes into all of this? What's a season look like for them? So kind of those X's and O's questions for that athlete. And, do you train, kart guys different than IndyCar guys and different things? For them, it was really cool. They had a lot of hand-eye coordination stuff. So I forget what this system was called, but it was all these buttons that would light up. And then there would be like numbers. So they would be telling me the number that they saw while hitting these buttons, but the numbers would only last a couple seconds. So I was, just entranced with this machine. But yeah, it would have been nice to know a little bit more. Do they help them with their nutrition and different things like that? I mean, now you have like an F1, physio coaches, and they help you with all the breathing and the training and the physical therapy, and they're like an all-in-one. And I think just really seeing what Jim actually did with them versus my few weeks that I spent there was honestly what I wish I would have asked, just a better understanding of coaching.
Yeah, it helps you develop kind of your initial coaching process and then what goes into all future teams that you work with.
Yeah.
Okay, my final question. Have you seen the new F1 movie?
No, I haven't.
It's awesome. It's very cool.
My dad saw it in theaters by himself, and I'm like, really?
I
You
did
couldn't
the
invite
exact
me?
same thing.
I'm
Yep.
like, come on. And, it's like, well, you're right. I have the boys, or, I don't know if my 1-year-old Christopher would have lasted through the movie, but yes, fingers crossed. I'm hoping to see that. But yeah, when F1 is on, it's always on at my house. And the boys know, like, Mama's watching F1 and they got their cars and they're all excited about it. So still a very true, avid Formula One fan, and a little bit of an IndyCar fan as well still. So especially when it's the 500. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I only bring it up because I was thinking there's like a training montage where, they have the young, kind of up and coming driver, and he's doing, blood lactate threshold testing and all this stuff, and then Brad Pitt's doing, chin ups and push ups.
Yeah,
It just cracks me up. Yeah.
I know, like, all the things that, it's nice coming back here, being a Division I school now, and seeing all the perks. I'm like, girls, guys, I didn't have this. This is amazing. Making sure you're taking advantage of every opportunity, because this wasn't here when I was here, and they know my age now. I'm 36. I have 2 kids, and they're like, "Oh, you're 36," and I'm like, "Yeah, I've had a different life prior and now, yeah." So, but yeah, I'm like, this university is it's amazing, and I'm so happy and fortunate to be a part of it. And I've got, I think, the best strength staff here to support me as well, and I'm just so grateful.
No, that's awesome. What I love to do with our athletes is remind them of pricing. What I'll tell them is, like, because my wife is the dietitian here, I'll say, she charges, I know for a fact she charges $75 per hour session with somebody who's not part of the university.
Yeah.
And so you can get this for free, right?
Right.
Or like my personal training stuff is pretty much the exact same price as well too. So, like, be aware of those things, because these are all free resources for you. You got to take advantage of them as much as possible.
Right. And once you graduate, you best believe I'm going to start charging you.
Exactly.
So take advantage, ask questions. Yeah. So.
Yep. 100%. Well, Maggie, thank you so much. I really enjoyed getting to know you better. I know our listeners definitely enjoyed hearing about your experience as well too. If somebody wants to follow you on Instagram, social media, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, Instagram is pretty much where I post weekly reels of what my week is, and it's Coach.Maggie Smith.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Maggie. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. This has been great.
Absolutely.